It's hard to believe, but indeed we have arrived. What's good, everybody? Welcome in to the Championship Week, Championship Sunday episode of the Early Edge, where we come on Tuesdays and we chop up what the current number is, some value, what to look ahead to 5 days before both games will be played. The first game on Sunday, the 49ers and the Eagles, the Bengals and the Chiefs. We are ready for it. So let's bring in the stars of the show. You know them. You love them. They're here every single week, all year long until we arrive today. First and foremost, live from Nashville, Tennessee, and a fellow Chiefs fan as well. M Squared, we've arrived, sir. Good afternoon.
We have arrived at our yearly tradition. That is the AFC Championship game for Chiefs fans out there. We tend to make it every year here. Obviously, big news with Patrick Mahomes. Big news on the line movement. The game's bouncing back and forth now today. Can't wait to hear what these guys have to say about it.
And next, he is everything. He's one of our OGs. He is the maestro, Larry Hartstein. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, guys. Two great matchups to dive into. Let's do it.
All right, and finally, he runs everything NFL at SportsLine and does one hell of a job. He is the stoic one, RJ White. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon. Now that my Bills are out, I can focus on winning my Super Bowl futures bet, which is 49ers plus 2,000. So we'll see if that can come through, but they have a tough road ahead.
They certainly do. It's not going to be easy. All right, gentlemen, let's get into it because we have just two games to break down from top to bottom, from left to right. So let's dive into game number one. And we're talking about line movement, where it started Sunday. We were on the air. That was super cool to see where the numbers opened up. But let's start with this. The Eagles laying 2.5, the total sitting on 46, and Philadelphia looked absolutely solid. Offensively, defensively, field goal kicker. That was a big storyline on the game on Sunday, but they looked great. So did the 49ers. Excuse me, the field goal kickers were in the 49ers game. But you understand what I'm saying. So let's start with the side, which is 2.5. And RJ, I'm going to start with you. Which side do you like?
I like the Eagles. I think this number is pretty short for this matchup, but the elite Philly rush offense is going to be up against the elite San Francisco rush defense, and the winner there's probably going to decide the game. But even if San Francisco does contain Philly's run game, their offense has to score points, and they're facing a top defense like they were last week. They're facing the number one defense in terms of pass rush sack rate, much better than Dallas. Dallas is kind of seen as that team, but they're number two right now. And the difference, the drop-off from Philly at number one to Dallas at number two is bigger than the drop-off from Dallas at number two to the number 17 team. So if you compare the gaps, it kind of treats Dallas like an average team when you look at how much better Philly is because of those 70 sacks, the depth they have along the line, and they can attack the San Francisco line. Philadelphia's defense better versus the run from week 10 on too, and their elite offense can put teams in negative game script quickly. So I think it's going to come down to, will Brock Purdy be able to win this game on the road? He scored a lot of points up until that last game, but he finally started to look shaky against that pass rush. And now that he's going to go on the road, brutal environment, I don't know that he's going to have what it takes. So you got an MVP caliber quarterback on one side for the home team. He proved he was healthy last week. He got a 7th-round rookie at home who has played well, but he showed a little cracks in the armor last week. And you throw in Philly's elite defense. They also have great coaching like San Francisco does. I don't know where San Francisco is making up this ground and make this line only 2.5. So I think Philly should be favored by a few more points. I would go on that side.
Just based off of what we saw last week, I would agree, and I would say the same thing. All right, Maestro, I'm coming to you. Last week, we cashed 2 tickets on the man that you're focused on today, his over catches, his over yards. So I'm very interested to hear why you are fading this man this week. You're up.
Yeah, Dallas Goedert is a heck of a player. I just don't think he's really going to thrive in this matchup. The 49ers have the number one rated defense against tight ends, giving up under 40 yards. I mean, they're linebackers, they're safeties. You watch them and you can see they're elite, but all the numbers back that up. And I just think this is a matchup where you want to attack the 49ers outside their cornerbacks. I mean, if Dak Prescott had any accuracy whatsoever, Michael Gallup had about a 50 or 60-yard play right there, and CeeDee Lamb would have had a much bigger game. So I think you want to attack the 49ers corners. You don't want to attack their linebackers and their safeties. You look at last week, Schultz had 10 targets, 5 catches for 27 yards. And like I said, on the season, they're giving up a little under 40 yards to the tight end position. So all tight ends on the opposing team collectively averaging under 40 yards. So I'm going to go under on Dallas Goedert. I do want to give my take on the game, but it may not be my turn for that.
No, you go right ahead, sir. What would you know? What? Let me come back to you. Because I do want to go to Mikey really quick because I'm going to go around a couple of times on each game. So, Mikey, let me come to you because I wanted to hit on the money line because we gave out at -2.5, but we've seen in recent years that sometimes those 2.5 can come into play. The money line is -145. Would you like that?
If I was going to play it, I would still lay the 2.5 with them personally on the Eagles side. Like RJ, I do make the game 3, or at least I think that's probably closer to where he makes it. I like the line here at this point, but I think the bigger angle to attack is going to be the total. Once again, I think the number is too high for the 49ers. Love the under last week in this matchup. I project it mostly the same in terms of both teams running the football. I think that we're going to see clock moving. 49ers know they aren't winning this game if they have to score more than 24 points. So I think that this is certainly going to be one where they keep things close and competitive, clock running, low scoring game. I honestly, I'm stunned that the number is above 44.5.
And for those of you brand new to our brand, when Chief barks, that means he loves whatever Mikey is saying. It's an insane correlation. It really, really is. And Chief clearly likes the under as well. Mikey, thank you. Now let me come back to you, Maestro, because you want to talk about which side you like. Now would be a great time. What do you like in this game?
Well, I'm leaning the other way, opposing RJ, but I want to see if I can get 3. MGM touched 3 briefly. I haven't seen most books go that far. And I know it's a rookie quarterback, but this running game, I believe, will have success. I know Jordan Davis is back for the Eagles, but you look at their season-long metrics, 23rd in rush efficiency, defense, 4.7 yards a carry allowed. And you also look at where they're weak in terms of the passing game. They have the elite corners in Slay and Bradbury. They have a great pass rush, but George Kittle should have a good day against these Eagles linebackers. And Purdy, obviously, that is his favorite target. So I think with throwing over the middle to Kittle, getting the running game going can do enough. I also like Mikey's play of under because I think the 49ers allowing 3.4 yards a carry, nobody is going to really talk about that game in week 2 of last season because it's not totally relevant. A.J. Brown wasn't on the team, but Jalen Hurts was not very good in that game against the 49ers when they went to Philly and held them to like 11 points or so. I'm thinking 20-17, somewhere in that range, but I will lean Niners if I can get a full 3.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Yes.
And just one thing is I'm also curious about the status of Charles Omenihu, who was arrested for misdemeanor domestic violence. He's one of their best linemen, might be their best lineman after Bosa. So he had 2 sacks against Seattle, a lot of pressures last week. I want to see, I'm assuming, it's the NFL. And if he's not, convicted, he's going to play, but haven't heard anything more.
Yeah, we'll keep our eyes out for that information and what happens there as well for the rest of the week. RJ, let me come back to you because when you look at how the Eagles got it done last week, they were dominant against the Giants. But the way the 49ers played against the Cowboys, CeeDee Lamb had a humongous game. So A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, they've got 2 number ones in Philadelphia instead of just 1 number one. Do you like those 2 guys to be able to compete and have big games against this Niners defense?
I do, because I think that's how you have to beat the Niners. You're not going to be able to rely on the run like you were against the Giants, a team that's very bad at defending the run. So I think you have to go to the pass game. Luckily for them, they do have those 2 very good weapons in the receiving game that they can target. The 49ers do give up a ton of yards to receivers. You consider how good their defense is overall, you'd probably be surprised at how high they rank in terms of yards allowed to receivers. So if you're looking at props for those guys, I kind of like it. I think Devontae Smith is more emerging as the number 1 guy of the last few weeks, the more reliable guy. So we'll see. I believe their lines were pretty close to each other. So I think I would lean more towards Smith having a bigger game than Brown, but maybe Brown hits a couple big plays early and he gets there and you're not even sweating it in the second quarter because you already have the over.
It's very, very, very good advice. Mikey, let me come to you because last week we saw the Cowboys' run defense was terrific, and McCaffrey, they didn't stay on this injury very long or talk about it very much, but he's got a calf issue, and depending on the number, might be a nice place to fade CMC this week.
Yeah, I do think it's interesting to look at his unders here. I think the most interesting thing in that last game is that he was really used as a third down back a lot of those situations. Having Elijah Mitchell back really helps the depth in the backfield there. They didn't run a ton with Deebo Samuel. That's still certainly going to be in play in these games. But I do think that with McCaffrey, they want to keep him fresh for some of those more pass heavy options. So yeah, I do think that looking at the unders, obviously, of course, you're certainly fading the risk of the one big play that he's had numerous times that frankly allows him to cash his overs many times. But yes, I do lean towards the under on McCaffrey props just because I do think Elijah Mitchell is going to take some of those carries between the tackles.
Yeah, Mitchell got a lot of carries in the second half. Do you know why that happened? Do you think it's more the injury than because he probably had 6 to 10 carries in that pivotal fourth quarter?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's that. And I think it's just keeping McCaffrey fresh for third downs when they're going to have to throw the football a little more obvious situations like that. Yeah, I think it's certainly managing the injury a little bit though.
Okay. Anybody have anything else they'd like to say on the first game for Sunday? We good?
I'm also leaning on the under too with these guys. It was 45.5 earlier in the day. It's at 46 now. So if the market's going to keep pushing it up, obviously you probably want to wait on it. But I wanted to hit it before it got down to, if it went the other way, again to 45, that's where the Eagles game ended last week. I wanted to be sure I got that number in the portfolio to be the under. So I wanted to play it at 45.5 and then it moved up. So if the market's going to move this up even more, I definitely think you can get more value later in the week.
Okay.
I will raise one other thing. Yep. That could come into play this week. We didn't see it because they blow out the Giants. They've been, dominating the first half. Obviously, if the Eagles do what they've always done, which is score 21 plus points in the first half, the Niners are toast. They're not going to be built to come back from more than a touchdown. However, the Eagles tackling, if you look at missed tackles, they have been, at some points this season, they were leading the NFL in missed tackles. And if that comes to haunt, when you get a quick out to Deebo Samuel or CMC, and they can take it the distance and change the whole complexion of this game. That's just something to watch for. I know people are supporting the Eagles and reading some of their chat. They're worried about that.
Okay. That's a great thing to be worried about because it's important, especially when you have really, really strong guys that can break those tackles. One other name that Maestro hit on and Mikey nailed perfectly last week, and Mikey will end the conversation with this. You said on Early Edge Live you would attack George Kittle from a longest reception prop standpoint. Well, he had 2 that would have cashed his longest reception prop, and his yardage prop did come in. That second one was a phenomenal over-the-middle catch. Would that be how you would attack George Kittle again against this Eagles defense?
Yeah, it most likely would. I still expect a little more Deebo Samuel to be involved in some of these games. So I'm going to stay off of Kittle personally. I think that if you want to play him, it would be through the longest reception. I do think they hit that seam route, probably goes for 25 yards. Will they hit it multiple times? I think it's unlikely they hit it multiple times. But if I wanted to play Kittle, that's the way I would look.
All right, keep your eye on it. Last week it was somewhere around 22.5, I think was the number, and he had 2 really long ones down the middle. So that was great analysis by Mikey. All right, that is the 3 p.m. Eastern game. Remember, they're different starts for Championship Sunday, just like last week, 3 and then 6:30 p.m. under the lights from Arrowhead. Does it get any better than this? The Bengals and the Chiefs. This number has moved all over the place. And Maestro, I'm going to start with you. It's currently at 1.5. Sunday night when we were all live on the air, this was the Chiefs were favored. Now the Bengals are favored, the total 46.5. And why shouldn't they be? I guess they've beaten Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs every single time ever since Joe Burrow's been there. What side do you like in this game?
Yeah, they've beaten them 3 straight times, outscored them in the second half of those games and overtime 47-20. And I could not believe that the Westgate opened the Chiefs at -3 even after what happened to Patrick Mahomes. Of course, it didn't last. I posted this on SportsLine when the Bengals were 1-point dogs. I would still lean that way, of course. These numbers are usually not that critical. Or of course, you could have 27-26 or something like that. I would still lean, laying under a field goal, but I like them a lot better as dogs. Patrick Mahomes, to my knowledge, has never been a dog at home. And certainly not in the playoffs. And I think he'll be out there. I think he'll play well. He's not he doesn't need to run to be a good quarterback, but I do think he does need that mobility in the plant leg to be the Patrick Mahomes that everybody knows. What's impressed me though with the Bengals is not only the defense down the stretch. Once DJ Reader came back, 15 points a game, completely flummoxed the Bills last week. The blitzing, Lou Anarumo's scheme. That guy's got a lot of pieces to play with, too, when you talk about Hubbard and Hendrickson and Von Bell and Jesse Bates. I mean, they have a lot of playmakers. That defense is very underrated. And then on offense, when you got all those wideouts and all of a sudden Joe Mixon running the ball like we haven't seen all season. That was one thing I was shocked at last week, was how well the Bengals ran the ball. The Chiefs, not a great rushing defense. Chris Jones, though, will be the best defensive player on the field, for either team. He could certainly blow things up, but overall, I like the Bengals, and I just think Lou Anarumo has a good scheme for Patrick Mahomes. You're never going to shut him down, but keeping him in the 20s is probably what it'll take.
Well, there's no doubt about that, and I got to tell you, I think there's going to be a lot of pressure put on Andy Reid. He's going to have to call the best game probably in his career if he's going to want to have the Chiefs, because he's got to change everything. Because Patrick Mahomes will not be able to run. A high ankle sprain, as Mikey said the other day, it's usually at least a 2 or 3 week injury. And if this was the regular season, he probably wouldn't be playing this week. But he will be out there. Guaranteed he will be out there, but not as mobile as he would like, certainly. Now, RJ, let me come to you, because Maestro just said a name that last week looked strong, was running through people like he was on a mission. And I'm talking about Joe Mixon. Do you like him this week?
I like him, but not running the ball. I like him receiving the ball. Since he's running backs at 50-plus receiving yards in all 3 of those wins against Kansas City, and Casey has allowed the most receptions to running backs in the regular season. Not quite the most yards, but the most receptions. So it's clearly something that opposing defenses are doing, targeting. They think that they can win in that way, and I expect Cincinnati's going to be the same way. And Mixon did top 30 receiving yards in 7 of his last regular season appearances before only getting to 17 and 18 the last 2 weeks. So he's still getting close to this number of 22.5 receiving yards, even if he didn't quite get there the last 2 weeks, and then he had been consistently going over it. So I think that he is a big part of the game plan, like you said, after that performance, and the passing work doesn't go as much to P. Ryan as it has the last few weeks. And I think he gets involved there, and Kansas City just has trouble stopping that. He's going to get probably to 30 yards. So I like going over 22.5 receiving yards at -113 for my play in this game.
And they're so good, aren't they? Whether it's at the end of the first half, they pick up those hidden yards that we don't see, and that's where Joe Mixon can come into play on maybe a late first half drive or a late fourth quarter drive that they need as well. Mikey, let me come to you, because you've heard a side, you've heard a prop, but I'd love to know, with the number moving around, starting with the Chiefs as a favorite and now with the Bengals as the favorite, what do you make of the line movement?
Yeah, I mean, I think the line movement, there's a couple things at play. Obviously, number one is Patrick Mahomes' injury. That's clearly 99% of it. Some of it is just everyone loves the Bengals. They thought the Bengals have been undervalued. The Bengals have a nice record against Kansas City in these very similar situations. So I think that's why we're seeing it here. The more interesting thing, though, is the line moving back to 1.5 from 2.5. It was 2.5 with signs of potentially a 3 for about a 20 to maybe 30-minute period. It's moved back to 1.5 across the board. So the play that I locked in is a teaser where I took the 2.5 up to 8.5. I brought the total from 46.5 down to 40.5. So we get to a key number of 41 in the NFL, getting over that to cash that. So that's a teaser that I've got for this game. As far as Patrick Mahomes' health, I expect him to give it a go. Really, it's not like life-threatening. It's not a massive injury. It's just one that takes time to heal, but I don't think he's going to necessarily be in a ton of trouble in terms of his long-term future if he does try to play on it. So I expect him to be out there. As far as the mobility, honestly, the mobility is what makes Patrick Mahomes so good. It turns ordinary plays where normal people would get sacked or get hurried. He's able to convert those. So it's a lot of what makes Patrick Mahomes good is that unique ability to move within the pocket. If that's not able to happen, I do think that the game plan changes drastically for Kansas City. Having said that, I do like them getting some points here. I think the game should be a pick'em still at this point with the information that we have. I don't think we see threes. I think it probably settles back close to a pick'em by the time it closes.
It's going to be fascinating to watch this line and where it ends up at on Sunday. And Maestro, let me come back to you, because wildcard weekend, it was all about overs, and they way went to the over. Then last week, maybe it's because of the quality of the defenses that we had, it was a struggle, and a lot of unders came in. 46.5 is where the number sits at right now. Your thoughts?
Well, it certainly feels low for this matchup, but then again, you look at the Bengals' O-line injuries. Of course, you start with Patrick Mahomes and limiting the Chiefs' offense a little bit maybe, but the Bengals' O-line injuries, they are going to want to run the ball. Those guys, those backups, obviously more comfortable running the ball, and they don't want to get exposed. So I think you're going to see that, I think, is part of the reason why this total is not 47 and a half, because they still have those O-line injuries that didn't really show up in Buffalo, because Buffalo, A, didn't have Von Miller, and B, in the snow, there was no pass rush. There was just no pass rush. So, it's tough for me, though. Just looking at the names and looking at all the talent on the field, I would say over. But it is a little bit low for these teams.
It is. I mean, only 37 in Buffalo. That was an under. You had 47 in Kansas City. That was an under as well. So let's just keep that in mind. But RJ, as I come to you, speaking of names and players, there was one player that set a postseason record for most receptions in a game. 14 for Travis Kelce, and it went for 98 yards. So he easily flew over both of his totals, but nobody else. Maybe Tony at 5 and 36, but it was a very Kelce heavy attack. What do you make of him this week?
Well, since he's not lacking in confidence with 3 wins against Kansas City over their last 13 months, and what did they do? In 2 of those games, they actually limited him pretty well. I don't have the full numbers in front of me, but he didn't go off in 2 of those games. So if they go to that same game plan in place, somebody's going to need to step up for Kansas City. That could happen. The Jerick McKinnon in the pass game is one option if you don't want to go to the receivers. But I think it's Mahomes, it's Andy Reid offense. They're going to be able to generate some things. And I'm not as worried about Mahomes' mobility with that ankle less than 100%. Because I think they can just do some things blocking wise to get a blocker out where normally he would just be running, by himself and being able to shake a defender. They just want to block for him now. And that's going to maybe key the defense a little bit. Maybe they'll have to worry about that, but I think he'll still be able to make some plays. I'm a little bit worried about his plant leg, not being able to do his throwing motion, but he looked fine in the second half. Didn't score a ton of points. But did engineer 1 touchdown drive. I think after a week off, a week of rest, recuperation, treatment, he's going to be okay for this game. Andy Reid talked about he doesn't think that it's as bad an injury as back in 2019 when he suffered a high ankle sprain. He did play on that the next week and had an amazing game against a very bad defense. It's going to be a lot tougher test, but it just goes to show you he is able to be effective when playing with an injury and not able to have his full mobility. So it does feel like everybody wants to be on Cincy with this line going up. I kind of like the Kansas City side and taking them while you can still get a 1.5. And we got to remember here that these swings from 1 on each side don't mean little in the less in the postseason than they did in the regular season, because you obviously can't tie. So in the regular season, you are going to have a couple games a year that end on the 0, and in the postseason, it's just not going to happen. So +1 either way is effectively kind of the same, almost the same thing. You're just doing the push. It's not a 2-point spread. It's a 1-point spread at that point.
That is a great point. Also, the total, I mean, this is a stretch, but both teams get the ball regardless in overtime as well. So that could potentially affect the over if it goes in there. Yes, Maestro.
I just wanted to say on December 4th, when these teams played, it closed at 53.
There you go. So there it is. Now, Mikey, let me come to you. What do you got first? And I got a question for you.
2 things on it. I want to talk about the field conditions in general. Getting a lot of questions about that. I do think that Cincy benefited significantly from getting to play in the snow last week. Rain hurts the offense. Snow helps the offense a ton. I think that helped Joe Mixon a lot. And then initial forecasts had basically similar forecast for Kansas City. That has moved up already. That is expected Saturday, not Sunday. It looks clear on Sunday, but it's going to be very cold with a high of 21 degrees.
That's exactly what I was going to ask you about, because I saw in the chat. So there you go. 2 birds in 1. Now, RJ, let me come back to you, because on the Bengals side of things, last week, maybe it's a chance for us to look at somebody different. What I mean by this is this. Samaje Perine, his combo number a week ago was right around 30. Combo number. He had over that rushing and receiving. He had over receptions numbers at all. So what do you make of the Bengals side and how we could attack their offense?
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see in the different game script if he has those type of numbers, because they, of course, led that game throughout and completely beat down my Buffalo Bills in an embarrassing showing that I'm not going to harp on too much here. But in that game, there was enough to go around for both running backs. And in this game, if they have that same type of game where they're blowing out the Chiefs, that would happen again. But we're not expecting that, even with Mahomes' injury. So I think it might be a little bit I wouldn't try to apply the lessons of last week to this week when you're looking at prop numbers. I think it's more likely to be more of a receiver game. Throw it to your Higginses and Chases down, a little bit more downfield than it is going to be to focus on P. Ryan in the passing game. I do like Mixon though, because when he's on the field, he's a threat as a rusher and a passer. And those situations where the Chiefs get worried and play everyone back, worried about those receivers, Mixon can do some damage underneath.
Yeah, and Maestro, when we look at things from the Kansas City side of things, and when you're talking about running, I don't even know who I would ask you about. Pacheco, but then they'll bench him for a quarter as well. We've been able to really, whether it's rush attempts or whether it's rush yards, been able to cash a lot fading the Kansas City running backs.
Yeah, I mean, Pacheco should get a lot of good touches because, he's obviously the most explosive guy they have, and they don't want to be just pass. But I'm actually looking at another guy. I'm looking at Jamar Chase, and there's been some talk about how great the Chiefs rookie is, McDuffie, and he is good. But the other side, Jalen Watson, has not been very good. And Chase, in 3 matchups with the Chiefs, 24 catches, 417 yards, and 4 touchdowns. So, that sounds pretty good to me.
We can't guard anybody. What's crazy is, like, last week we held the Jags to like 10 or 13. People are like, oh, the defense played great. When they have elite wideouts, we can't guard anybody. We've shown that over the last few years. I'm very scared for this matchup. All right. Anything else? Anything else we want to add? We broke those down. Yes, Mikey.
Just say watch out for Kadarius Toney here, depending on how healthy Mahomes is. He was set up to lead the team in targets pretty clearly after Travis Kelce, of course. I think that depending on the health of him here, I think they're going to try and put the ball in his hands just because of the options that they have with some of those short area targets. If Mahomes is limited like we do think he is, the ball is going to have to come out a little bit quicker than we like typically. So look for Kadarius Toney. I think that had Mahomes played that entire game, he sees double-digit targets in that one.
Yeah, he had 5 catches for 36 yards. So he still had a pretty productive game for him. So great point by you. Anybody else? Are we good? Because we're going to be able to break this down all week long. And then, of course, Sunday, not once, but twice. But before we get to the end of the show, it is that time. Our recap presented by Caesars Sportsbook and Casino, where we recap our best bets that we have on Tuesday. Maestro, start us off. What do you like?
Well, I like the Bengals. They've beaten the Chiefs 3 straight times. They've outscored them 47-20 after halftime. The adjustments that Lou Anarumo makes, those are a real factor in this matchup. And then I like in the other game, Dallas Goedert under 45.5 receiving yards, because the Niners are very tough on tight ends. Their linebackers, their safeties, they allow less than 40 yards on average to all of the tight ends on an opponent. So I like Goddard under 45.5.
RJ, talk to me.
I like the Eagles -2.5. I think that they are not getting enough respect with having an MVP caliber quarterback against a 7th-round rookie going on the road in this home game. This line should be on the other side of 3 for me. So I'm taking Eagles -2.5. I like Joe Mixon to go over 22.5 receiving yards at -113. I believe that's how you attack this Kansas City defense, as other offenses have shown in the past, and how the Bengals themselves have shown in their 3 wins against the Chiefs. So I think he's going to have a good game through the air.
And Mikey, I know you don't have a best bet yet, but if you were to lean into an exacta perhaps for the teams that could advance this weekend, what would you say?
I would lean into Kansas City over the 49ers at +700 currently. We've seen a little bit of shift in these lines, obviously related to the Patrick Mahomes situation. But I think the thing you need to focus on here is the line moving back in their favor up to 1.5 here. To show that they were clearly mismatched in this game, you would expect this line to be all the way to -3 for Cincy. Keeping in mind, yes, they've lost 3 straight times. You know what also happened in each of those 3 games? Kansas City had an implied win probability of over 77% in the second half of all 3 of those games. I think this game is going to be ultra competitive. You're getting a nice discount in the futures market on the exacta.
And there you have it. Our recap presented as always by Caesars Sportsbook and Casino. All right, when we wrap up every single one of our shows, I like to ask my guys, what's the number one most important thing they're looking forward to this week, so you can use the information for yourself or into the future for yourself. Maestro, start us off.
I don't know if this is the most important thing, but it's something that I've been thinking about, and it's a disadvantage for the 49ers to play this game at 3 Eastern because they have not played a game that early. That's noon out on the West Coast, if my math is correct. And they're normally going to be kicking off a lot later. And it's little things like that, the circadian rhythm. That's one of the things that's worrying me about the 49ers.
Mikey.
For me, it's obviously Patrick Mahomes' health, but it's Kadarius Toney. Look, he's had all this time to get up to speed in the offense. It's starting to show. 7 targets last week. He's had rushing attempts in each of the last 2 games. They're going to put the football in his hand. I think he's going to have a big day.
RJ.
Bengals made the Super Bowl last year, and nobody expected it. Now they are favored to go back to the Super Bowl on the road against the Chiefs after beating the Bills, who was everybody's preseason favorite to get to the Super Bowl. So these Bengals are tough. They're going to be a tough out. There is some conversation that happened on Twitter today about, is Burrow already better than Mahomes? And I think that's a kind of a stretch considering what Mahomes has done over his first 5 years, getting to the AFC Championship as a starter in his first 5 years every single time. But I see the window open for Burrow if he wins this game, if he goes on and wins the Super Bowl, and then maybe gets in the MVP conversation in the next couple of years. We can have that conversation in 2 years about which of those 2 quarterbacks were better through their first 5 years as starter. I think at that point, Burrow might have a chance to do it, which is wild when you consider how great Mahomes has been on the field over his first 5 years.
I think you're going to start looking at these 2 guys like we looked at Peyton and Tom. Who has the most championships is who's the best one. Yes, Maestro.
And I just think we have 2 great matchups, and we have a guy that was taken number 1 overall, and we have a guy that was taken last overall, both leading their teams on Sunday.
Isn't that something? Mr. Irrelevant. And by the way, I did a package for CBS Sports today on Brock Purdy. So check that out on social media and on pregame shows around the league this week on CBS platforms. But we're not going to leave you hanging high and dry at home this Sunday. No, because we're going to come in strong. We got our 10 a.m. show, yes. But how about special start times? Early Edge live at 2 p.m. Eastern time, counting down to the 49ers and the Eagles, the NFC Championship game at 3 p.m. Eastern time. Then later in the afternoon at 5:30 p.m. Eastern time, a whole new show, counting down to the Bengals and the Chiefs, which starts at 6:30 p.m. Eastern time from Arrowhead Stadium. I told you we got you covered top to bottom, left to right. But at this point of the show, there's only one thing left to do. And I believe you all know what that is. You've got your marching orders. Let's take all of these tickets straight to the pay window. My entire crew, love them all season long. M Squared, the Stoic One, the Maestro, doing work. But we are ready and set for Championship Sunday. Why do we do it? Well, we grind for you so we can win with you. We love it all right here at the Early Edge. Good luck.